So our first Moses Organic Field Day this year is season extension at Mhonpaj Garden. We are Moses. I'll tell you a little bit about us first before we jump into the field day. We are an education service for farmers. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and empower farmers to thrive in a sustainable organic system of agriculture. And some of the resources that we offer for farmers are, first of all, we have an awesome organic specialist team. So you can talk to another farmer about organic production, and we have and certification, and you can talk to someone in English, Hmong, Spanish, Somali, Swahili. You can either call 888-90-MOSES, or you can visit on our website at mosesorganic.org/ask. Something that we're well known for is our annual Moses Organic Farming Conference. And our website is mosesorganic.org. And we also have free publications that we can mail to you or you can download from our website. And those include Guidebook for Organic Certification, Midwest Organic Resource Directory, and you also can get a subscription to the Organic Broadcaster newspaper. And then we have various other projects, including our organic farming podcast. So the field day today is supported by friends from North Central SARE and also sponsored by Zimmerman's High Tunnels. Oops. So now I'm going to have Chuck and Mhonpaj take it away. If you want to do the introductions, Chuck.
Hi, yep. Can you hear me all right and see me okay? Everything good? I don't know if they can hear me. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
You're doing good.
So today, first, we're going to hear from John Sipple, who is an NRCS district conservationist in Dunn County, Wisconsin. And he's going to tell us about the EQIP program and how you can get involved with that. And we're also going to hear from Heather Kirkpatrick, who is from the Farm Service Agency, or FSA, who can also help finance farm projects like this. So, and then after that, we'll hear from Mhonpaj and see her high tunnel in action here. So now I'll turn it over to John and Heather, and they can share about their programs, and then you can ask them any questions you want. So thank you, John and Heather.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for having Heather and myself here to share in the high tunnel experience. I'm probably going to kick it over to Heather right away so she can explain the eligibility process and the processes that USDA uses to make a customer eligible for our programs. Heather, take it away.
Hi, I'm Heather. I'm with the Dunn County Farm Service Agency. So we're a sister agency to NRCS. So John and I work together with several of our programs. And one of the pieces that we do with NRCS are some of our eligibility paperwork that we use both with FSA and with NRCS programs. So I believe he's going to talk about EQIP. And when you enroll in EQIP, there's 3 different forms you're going to fill out with the FSA. The first one is a CCC 941, and that's going to be your adjusted gross income. So that is basically taking your average adjusted gross income from the previous 3 tax years, and you're just certifying whether or not you make less than or more than $900,000 a year. And that is an annual certification. So we do that once a year. The next form you're going to end up filling out is called an 80-1026. And that is basically going to be a certification that you are willing to comply with conservation practices, which means you're agreeing that you're not going to fill in a wetland or drain a wetland or clear woods to put in agricultural land unless you get permission from NRCS. And then the third form you're going to fill out is called a CCC 902 Farm Operating Plan. And for purposes of the EQIP program, all we're really verifying on there is that you're a US citizen or a legal alien and that you are over the age of 18. So that one's a pretty straightforward form as well. I know Chuck hit on a little bit. FSA does also offer some lending services for things such as high tunnels. Every FSA office in whatever county you're in any state should have a farm loan officer. If you call the office, they can talk you through some of those options. I'm not a farm loan officer, so I don't know a lot of the details, but they do offer anywhere from very small, called microloans, up to large farm ownership loans. And there's some different eligibility pieces there, but it's very individual to your situation. So you should talk to a farm loan officer if you're interested in that. I'm gonna let John keep talking about his EQIP program.
Thank you, Heather. Once our first step of eligibility is taken care of, meeting with an FSA representative and getting those 3 forms signed and moved on, we then look at our EQIP process. EQIP stands for Environmental Quality Incentive Program. This program is USDA funded to help solve resource concerns. To be eligible, there must be a resource concern out there on the landscape. A high tunnel would help promote additional growing days in the spring and additional growing days in the fall. So we can usually look at it from a plant health standpoint. You know, early in the spring, we could have a late frost like we did the last couple weeks, where we could lose some of our plants, or you know, an early frost in the fall, so we could lose some of our plants. So we can extend the growing season for the most part. So that would be the eligibility standpoint from from NRCS standpoint. Is there a resource concern there? Once we have that resource concern established, we would then look at the site. Does the site meet our eligibility? Such as, is there an existing garden there? And is existing agricultural field? The site has to be in ag production currently. We cannot take someone's lawn. We cannot take someone's, I'm going to say non-cropped, non-agricultural productive acres and put a high tunnel on them. It has to have been cropped, or has to have had a garden of some sort, vegetable production in there in the past. Once we have that established, then we work with the producer on coming up with a site plan. You know, where would you like to have the high tunnel located on that garden? What size, what dimensions? How would all that fit into what the producer's goals and objectives are? Once we have that established, we then enter into our ranking period, where we take your application and we rank it against every other high tunnel application that we have within the state of Wisconsin. Through that ranking criteria, basically we float the top applications to the top of that list. We then use our state allocation of funds, and we fund it down, spend as many dollars as we can, and fund as many applications as we can of the allocation that we receive from Washington, and go from there. Our competition for high tunnels has been pretty fierce the last couple of years. It seems there's been a lot of interest in getting high tunnels, and our funds keep dwindling as well. So not saying that there is not a likelihood, but there's a chance that we could get funding. There's other pools that we could fund in. So I think this webinar is being broadcast in multiple different languages. A lot of times those are historically underserved clients. Those customers receive a special pot of funds. So if you are a historically underserved client, we have another pot of funds for individuals to apply for as well. So multiple different funding mechanisms for multiple different opportunities for getting funding. In a nutshell, our high tunnel program looks at, if you are selected for funding, we'd be looking at buying a kit. There was a kit or a company mentioned earlier on in the broadcast, that company would be eligible for the kit. You purchase a kit, you install the kit. Once the structure is installed, the producer comes back to NRCS and says, hey, I have my high tunnel installed. I would like to get reimbursed for that product. NRCS comes out, verifies measurements of the high tunnel. Is it 40 by 60? And then we pay based on the square footage of the high tunnel installed. Once that's all said and done, we issue the landowner the reimbursement. They're expected to maintain that high tunnel for 4 years after the installation. That's the life expectancy of the plastic. Once the plastic is, I'm going to say, used up, it's, the responsibility of the producer then to replace the plastic and continue on with the high tunnel production. In a nutshell, CFSA to determine eligibility, then work with NRCS on site-specific conditions, work with, once your application is ready, work with NRCS to submit an application, I should say, for funding. Once that application is selected for funding, work with a consultant or a company to buy a kit, install the high tunnel, get reimbursed by NRCS for that high tunnel. Seems like a very simple process, but there's a lot of steps and a lot of moving pieces in that process. So first step, get a hold of NRCS, get a hold of FSA, work with them through their eligibility processes, and go from there. Right now, I anticipate roughly on October 1st of 2021 for a sign-up date for funding for 2022 projects. Typically, our funding cycles run October 1 through September 1. So that's usually a good starting point or a good time frame to get in touch with your NRCS representative or your FSA representatives to start that eligibility process. With that, Chuck, I think that kind of summarizes the FSA and the NRCS eligibility processes, as well as the EQIP process for a high tunnel. Are there any questions for anybody out there or from anybody out there?
I'm not hearing anything or not seeing anything in the chat. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Staff B, what is it FSHA? Because he was going too fast.
Yeah, so if no one has any questions, then we can move on to the high tunnel portion.
Actually, Chuck, I think B had a question. He was asking, it's
Yeah,
the government agencies, we were going kind of fast and he
Right.
wanted to translate those properly.
Oh, yeah. NRCS stands for Natural Resources Conservation Service.
No, I just want the acronym because it's going too fast. I couldn't catch on to it.
FSA stands for Farm
In,
Service Agency.
HA. Okay, it's NFHA. Okay, because I was saying too many other ones. FF or something. Sorry.
About my talking fast, I get a little excited and
Okay.
lose control.
You know what else I can do? I will put them in the chat for you.
Okay, sounds good.
Typically is a USDA service center in the majority of the counties. So I'm going to say,
Yeah, I didn't get the acronym, and it's hard for me just to say the word.
USDA service center in every county, so you should be able to find
DA, every county.
FSA office or an NRCS office within each individual county that you're working with, whether you be in Minnesota and or Wisconsin.
Okay, thank you.
If I could also add, John's going to turn it. We also, FSA has a website. I believe NRCS is included in this website. It's called farmers.gov. So farmers.gov. And you can navigate to that site and look through all the different programs that both FSA and NRCS have available, and just kind of look through and see what might fit your scenario.
All right, any other questions or anything else, Heather or John, you'd like to add?
No, we appreciate it and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'll let Mhonpaj introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at Mhonpaj's Garden. I'm so excited to have you guys here. I know in times of COVID, we would love to have you guys here at the farm with us, but unfortunately we could try to make you see and hear and smell the birds, and the heat in this high tunnel is probably like 80 degrees and we're sweating in here, right? So We just lifted the sidewalls, so it's a little bit cooler, just to give you guys a concept of what a high tunnel is. So I will speak a little bit slower so my interpreters can catch up. And if you need me to slow down, just feel free to raise your hand and let me know, and I could slow down. I tend to speak faster. So again, I'm Mhonpaj Lee, and I own and operate with my mother, May, and a dad, Chu, along with my husband, Panat, and our in-laws. This year, we are full-time farming. Usually, this was all of our part-time farming. But today's workshop, I'm most excited about. When we first came here to the US, we didn't know that there was such thing as season extension. My parents did not know. We are descendant Hmong, and I was born and raised here, and my parents, of course, refuged here to the US, and they absolutely loved farming. We are also certified organic farmers. We run and operate a 20-acre farm out in Hugo, and we also operate out of Big River Farms here in Minnesota. And we are this year, after applying a few years, being very patient, our second year of application, we did receive an NRCS grant to get one of our high tunnels located in Hugo. This is our up and running high tunnel here in Big River Farms in Marina and St. Croix. And the operation that we do here are what I call high value crops. So before I move on, I just want to do a check-in with everyone if they could hear me okay. Are the interpreters, if I'm speaking at this rate, is it okay with everyone? We're good?
Yes, sounds good.
Awesome. Okay. So for our operation here, I usually our heirloom varieties, and heirloom, I like to say it's like ancestral seeds that we grow. Because we're certified organic, we like to grow our heirloom tomatoes. Varieties are Brandywine, Cherokee Purple. We have Sun Gold tomatoes and cherry and grape tomatoes that we grow in this high tunnel. And a lot of people like to ask me, what is the difference between a high tunnel and a greenhouse, right? Because they're like, they look exactly the same, but what's the difference? A lot of people in your zoning district, when you go to, if you're farming anywhere, you want to check with your city, and are these accessory buildings or dwellings, and does it count as an actual greenhouse? What's nice is these are considered temporary structure in the district that I live in. So they're considered temporary structures, meaning that you can put it in the ground and take it out later on if you didn't want it in your county. So when you're applying for the grant, they're going to ask for a supplier who you go through. We went through Zimmerman and also Farm Tech. All our high tunnels out in Hugo is from Zimmerman. And I liked it because we can customize our high tunnels and figure out what kind of truss system we want, if it's W truss or if it's an M truss. Truss system is basically how the high tunnel comes together and holds up, and the sturdiness. Because here in Minnesota, we have a lot of snow. So you deal with a lot of the plastic getting, caving in the winter. You have to come into their high tunnels and kind of pop them so that they're not creating bulges of bags of snow in your high tunnel. So during the winter season, we like to lift the high tunnels to the side, so that way the plastic, either take the plastic off or just lift the sides and come throughout the winter to look at. A lot of people with high tunnels, the height of your high tunnel is a lot taller than your traditional greenhouse, because greenhouse are heated. It requires heat. There's no heating, there's no fan system. The only way of monitoring is your side walls to open it up to let air in and let it out. But by just having that extra protection from the weather, a lot of our tomatoes back in the days, we had issues with blight issues and disease and bacteria with the ground, because potatoes are so sensitive, tomatoes are so sensitive, that after we've grown it indoors, we've seen a great success. So for an example is that we'll get our plantings earlier in July if we were to plant it inside the high tunnels. In just a few weeks of sales at the farmer's market, people get excited about. So I want to say from just this high tunnel, we generate about 180 pints of tomatoes within 1 week picking, and then we have to wait again the next week. If you guys can kind of peek, May's probably in the background here, and she's actually pruning the tomatoes. Hi, say hi, Mom. She's actually the true hero of the farm. I'm just the shining face. But truth is, it's all my mom and my dad's hard labor, along with my family and my husband, Panat, and his siblings. We so every time we're out here trellising, we're pruning, we're making sure that they're cross-pollinating, and you're taking care of it like babies. Also, what we do inside the high tunnel here is we have mulch, plastic mulch on the bottom, so that way it could keep the weeds down as a natural way of weed control. A lot of the times in a high tunnel, you want to crop rotate. So that way, if you're planting, for example, tomatoes here this year, you might want to do a salad and a cover crop in between your plantings to add nutrition back into it. And you have to remember that you have to drip irrigate here. Right now, my husband and I are putting in an irrigation system at the Hugo farm, which has no irrigation, whereas here at Big River Farms. So looking at the pressure of your well and making sure that it irrigates proper water to your plants is very important. So when you're doing a budget for your high tunnels, I recommend that you also take into consideration your supplies to put up the side walls, so the wood, and the grading of because we didn't want to get rid of the topsoil and the fertility of this. Sometimes your lot may be crooked or it may be not leveled, that you want to make sure that you have leveled ground. So like we've had issues where people put it in and they pound it and all of a sudden their poles are too short on one side. So as you're erecting the structure, those are things that you might want to look at. So I know I'm going into more of quickly about our operation and what we have planted in here. I'm just going to pause a bit to see if there's any questions in regards to that, either what we're planting in here and how we selected our structures. Any questions?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'll keep going. I guess Chuck will wake me if there's any questions. Feel free. I want to keep this as dialogue. It's usually, I'm talking to the phone here. So if you guys are over and virtually looking, and if you think of a question, feel free to raise your hand and chime in, and Chuck will definitely let me know if there's any questions. I'll keep moving on unless if there's any pop-up questions. The other thing is when we selected the high tunnel, our high tunnel was actually 96 feet by 30. But when there was a tornado that came through here in Hugo and Marine St. Croix area that lifted up half of our high tunnels 5 years ago. So we do have a portion of like about, I want to say 6 of these range, which is like 3 feet long. So about 15, we lost about like 10 foot of our high tunnel. So you can see our growing space compared to the high tunnel next door to us. It's a little bit shorter, but we still bear with it. And so another thing to keep in mind when you guys are selecting or going through the NRCS process is that you want to make sure like production wise on what you want to put in the high tunnels and come up with a really good crop plan. So one thing we do is we kind of figure out what our markets are and the productivity and the crop yield and the profits for each of these. And so I want to say that like we've been able to markets that we've gotten into with some of our crops with tomatoes is the school. So I believe we provided about 3,000 pints of 300, right, Mom? Was it 300 pints or 3,000 pints? It was $3,000 worth of, I know, inventory. Yeah, last year was. We have like last year for the school it was about 3,000 pints, right? No, 2,000. Oh, 2,500 pints of tomatoes. That was a lot of tomatoes for us to deliver to the school systems of Minneapolis School District. So it also opened up opportunities for us to be able to sell to wholesalers. And what's nice, it's a controlled temperature. So you're not getting rain or you're not getting blight issues. So we have a really good success.
So there's
okay,
a quick question.
Yep.
Karen says, hi from Minnesota Grown. Are you experimenting with any unique crops in a high tunnel setting this year?
I do. I've always wanted to do ginger, but I know that the season started and our other high tunnels are not up yet. But the two that we want to experiment with is ginger, and I do want to incorporate some fruits. But we have not yet talked to the certifier about it or have done it. But those are the two crops that we want to experiment with. We've seen people grow ginger inside high tunnels, but it's temperature controlled. So we're still creatively trying to figure that out. But the next thing is we also are wanting to do our Hmong herbs. We've contracted with the hospitals here in the Twin Cities, Regents Hospital, Fairview Hospitals through the Good Acre, and they buy our Hmong herbs for women who are in 30 days postpartum. We provide those to them. So one way we want to learn is how to keep our specialty crops for Hmong herbs inside the high tunnels.
All right, and then there's also.
Yeah, so then I will, do you want me to like move
Sure.
the side here and show people a tour of the high tunnel? So if you guys can just look behind here, as we're trying to crop rotate, there's like 3 different crops in here, as you say, 3 different beds. These are garlic chives, and then we have here our garlic scapes, and then we have here our basil, and then kale, and then we have lettuce that's growing. So as you can see, there's 3 rows. And then in the middle here is the 5 rows of, I can walk right over here, the 5 rows of tomato plants. And each of these are different varieties like Brandywine, cherry tomatoes, sun golds, and just a variety of tomatoes in here. And then at the very end over here, if you guys could still hear me, is our Swiss chard. So as you can see, like even within the crop diversity inside your high tunnel, you can maybe change up beds. If let's say you've done tomatoes here this year and you want to swap over to next year, maybe not growing it, or maybe even in between the beds, what you can do is you can swap one bed and leave that sit fallow, put a cover crop. For those of you who don't know what cover crop or is interpreting, is cover crop is it gives nutrition back into your soil. So kind of like clover, winter rye, it just depends on what season you're seeding it. So if it's heading towards the winter, then you want to use something maybe more hardy like winter rye into your soil. So we're always integrating nutrition back into the soil. A lot of questions, and just to let you know, I'm also an organic specialist, part of Moses for the Hmong community, and I speak Hmong. Is a lot of questions I get, phone calls I get is, what do you use to make your crops so good every year? And I tell them you have to put, they don't get why you would seed grass. They call them grass seeds. And I mean, it's actually not grass, it's clover, or it's a winter rye that we would incorporate in our soil before the end of the season to add fertility back. And then also to get soil testing done in your high tunnel to see what you're lacking, or maybe a lot of people who are erecting structures in the city or high tunnels are not aware of the chemical spills that maybe are on certain lots. So there's a lot of this like community gardening. And the first thing I advise anybody to do that is to get a test, because you may have chemical like lead. There was one farmer who called me the other day and she needed insurance. She's like, our entire lot has lead in the soil, so they can't farm the soil. So I always tell people that your fertility is very important. It's almost like you go into the doctor to figure out what vitamins you're lacking, and they'll say, oh, is it nitrogen? Is it phosphorus? Is it? And so you would know what to incorporate back into your soil. So we've been in this high tunnel for like the past 10 years, and our crops have done good. We've not had like major pest issues or any disease issues. So I think we've kept a good diversity of it. Keeping the high tunnels breathable is also important. So, I mean, I just get so excited. So any other questions?
What are some of the herbs? I think maybe referring to the
Hmong
Hmong
herbs. Okay, so my sister wrote a book called 30 Days of Purification. It's Zongsi herbs, and I will give that to Chuck, so he
Right.
can include it in the little chat later for you guys. But I researched, I initially got an NCRCR grant when I first farmed here at Big River Farms 15 years ago. And I started researching and found out that there was actually antioxidants and medicinal purposes, like scientific study that supported some of these Hmong herbs. And there was no name for them in Hmong, so I didn't know the scientific name. So I didn't know that it was named mugwort, or it wasn't like, we call it duck feet in Hmong, kata olia, where it had a specific English scientific name. And I don't have all those in my head and memorized right now. So I would like to refer you guys to her book. She has not yet enough funding to like publicly, do mass publishing of it. So it's always been like to be ordered, and she doesn't have the upfront funds to like print the books. So she does have a few copies if you want to know. And she does have a website that she updates people. So there's over 14 herbs that a Hmong woman would take to cleanse her body postpartum. We believe that in your most vulnerable stages of postpartum, you can go into postpartum depression or have like a lack of nutrition. So it cleanses your body, it increases your iron levels. And so the next study, I believe the U of M and my sister just received a small grant to this year to pursue that and kind of do more research about what the names of the herbs are.
What's the website? I can put it in the chat.
It's she only has a Facebook. It's
Okay.
under Zongsi's Conservatory. Yep.
So like that.
Yep, Zongxee, and then conservatory.
XE.
Yep, Zongxee Conservatory. So it's under Facebook. She has a Facebook link, and you can like it and message her, and she'll.
That right there, like that?
Yeah,
did
it's
it- okay.
Zongxee. Yeah, you want me to type it for you?
Yeah.
So to let everybody know, it's like, yeah, Zongxee, Zong. I know my dad named us each Zongxee Conservatory. There we go. And if you just go to Facebook and type in Zongxee Conservatory, she'll pop up for you, and friend her, and I'll let her know that you guys are, a bunch of people are friending her, and for her to like accept her to her Facebook page.
All right. So.
Yeah, any other questions? I mean, I could highlight about, I think some common questions that I have is like, how do you know profit or loss? There's a lot of research that I did prior to this. U of M had like this booklet called High Tunnel Production, and it goes over different types of like specialty crops that they've grown before, like zucchinis and cucumbers and like just different varieties and the production of how a high tunnel should yield. So some of that information was very beneficial for me. And so the total of, we hope to eventually have a total of 4 operational high tunnels, new high tunnels, and we will specialize in that and hopefully grow like more greens, more Asian varieties too. I think there's been a popularity of like our lemongrasses and like the chum choys and the bok choys and just basically more ethnic based food and incorporating into our CSA. So we run a 100-member CSA share every year, and our members are constantly looking for new varieties. So we try to incorporate our traditional foods into that and give them recipes.
Maybe you could talk a bit about how it allows you to be at the market earlier.
Yes. Yep. So like being at the market earlier makes a real difference when no one else has it and you have it. So and also because we are organic, the price differences, and then also like the popularity is really popular. So before I bring something to market, I would post online, or I would tell the farmers market manager and say, hey, I'm bringing tomatoes. And there's a huge demand for early tomatoes and late season tomatoes, or early cucumber and late. It's always like people want the food most when it's not around, and the freshness of it. We also now like provide delivery on Tuesdays for those who are immune suppressed and can't go out. We also do deliveries. So that has opened up my eyes to being at the market early with heirloom tomatoes has been like, there's always like an abundance, and you're selling everything you're taking to market. Whereas before, I think when we went with tomatoes and everybody else had in season the tomatoes, and like there was, it was less of a popularity and everyone had it. So, there was less demand. So the supply and demand for having just it a little bit earlier, just even in your earlier months, just by a few weeks, and by a few weeks at the tail end of the season makes a huge difference. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And are you able to grow different varieties that you wouldn't be as successful with outside?
Oh yeah. Like I think as Chuck was walking in today, we're like, our Swiss chard could grow like 3 feet long, and you probably only need like 4 Swiss chard, whereas we're growing it outdoors and they're like this tall, and you need like probably 6 to a bunch versus like 3, because these are so long. They're like 1.5 feet tall. So definitely you're getting like a nicer quality. You have a temperature controlled, and then yet it's still getting all of the nutrition that it has in the ground. So, and you're planting in ground. So a lot of people ask me, oh, is a greenhouse the same as a high tunnel? Are you planting it on tables? I was like, no, actually we're planting in ground into the floor of the high tunnel. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to, so I'll show here, you have some,
these are seedling trays. Yep.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about seedling production?
Yeah. So seedling production happens inside the greenhouse. So like our greenhouse is one high tunnel away from us. And that greenhouse actually, we have a germination chamber. So already starting in like, I want to say February, we're already germinating these in these germination chambers, giving it heat, and then having it sprout. And once it sprouts, and you're repotting them, right? So like these are like 120 cells, and how deep they are, maybe 2 inches. And you just basically plant them, put them in there, and you're watering it so May's out here. May's the main farm manager here at Big River Farms. and she's out here twice every day watering, making sure that it's temperature controlled. So you also don't want to like burn your seeds or like overwater them. So like has to be the right humidity, the right temperature, and you don't want to let your plants dry out too. So let's say if you go on vacation, you constantly need someone in there monitoring. We have a thermostat in there that will know when to click on and off, whereas a high tunnel doesn't have that capability. So I do recommend you to buy a thermostat that alerts you. At the Good Acre, they have a tool.
We're gonna pause real quick because I think the Hmong interpreter had to switch over.
Okay.
Stephanie, is that right?
Yep. We're going to welcome Zor. We had to let B go. He had to go. And let me make sure that.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that everything is going smoothly before we start again.
Okay.
Yep. 1 second, please. Thank you. Hang on.
And now's a good time if anyone wants to ask any questions.
Yes, and let me know what you guys find interesting, or maybe questions that you might have about high tunnel growing. Like I could definitely triage stuff that is interesting to you, or something you've always wondered about. It doesn't have to pertain to what we're growing. And it's definitely heating up in here.
Yeah.
The sun's directly in our eyes, and it's nice and it's warm.
All right. All right.
Are we ready to go?
No,
Okay.
it's not letting me update.
Do you guys want me to or do you want me to talk about anything, or does anybody? Oh, I'm just curious, how many people are online right now with us?
Let's see.
Or should we like do a poll? Like we could do a poll. You want to do a poll?
There's 24
There's
people.
24.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question to everyone? Maybe just so I know, how many of you are farmers and interested in getting a high tunnel this year? Everyone could just maybe put in the chat box, like.
One person said, I am not.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can feel free to just put your name and where you're from and why you're here in the chat. That'd be interesting
That'd
to
be great.
see.
Yeah, if you guys could put that in there. I want to know who my audience is. If it's any new farmers out there, let me know. And so that way I could, structure my conversation towards that. Or if those of you who are just interested in getting a grant next year for your farm, I'd like to hear that too.
All right.
All right. Annette says, I am a home gardener, but I'm interested in adding a high tunnel to my raised beds, from Mishicot, Wisconsin.
Okay, awesome.
Brandon says he's more interested in what you use for nutrients and fertility inputs, so we can cover that. And then Hannah works for the NRCS in South Dakota, and she is new to gardening at home herself, and she assists with producers and high tunnel applications.
Okay.
Karen is from Minnesota Grown at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and she says, we are so glad to work with Mhonpaj Garden, and I'm excited to be able to picture what's new on your farm.
Awesome. Cool. And so for the soil fertility, our main supplier used to be Cowsmo with our potting soils. So they're certified organic. So that's usually where we get our compost from to do our potting soil. I think we're moving to a different vendor next year. We'll see, to Ohio. And then for the fertility, like you said, just make sure you do your soil test and then figure out, because everybody's ground, and depending on whether it's clay or it's, and your, whatever you're growing in your high tunnels, you have to kind of see what kind of soil it is. Is it more like clay? Is it more sandy? Because like rooted crops kind of like that sandy, you know, texture. So you're planting your potatoes and your carrots. So right now it's really interesting. We're putting on our land at Hugo, and we found out it's kind of like sandy on the top of the hills, and we've got like loam on the bottom of the hills. And it's really nice because then we could put all of our peppers and stuff and our, you know, our radishes and stuff in the lower lands, and then put our rooted crops up higher. And our green onions are actually really doing really well in the sandy soil, which is interesting altogether. So I think there's just certain crops that does better too. So maybe your experimental year is kind of figuring out your soil type. NRCS has a website called Soil Survey that I went to, and I was able to like click on my region or whatever, and it gives you like what kind of loam it is. Like, is it buffalo loam? And you learn all about your soil type. So I definitely recommend you. It's a free tool, and they've already done all this research. So if you want to just kind of know your lay of your
I
land,
can put the link.
yeah, it's called I don't know, Web Soil Survey. I
Web
just
soil
Google.
survey. Yeah.
Yeah, I just Google Web Soil Survey NRCS. I don't have those long links memorized, but even when you like right now when you're planning to put on a house, right, it also teaches you like how deep the water table is to your land. So like if you're tapping into a well, you know, that's good information to know, or like to know that water table is higher on your lot. So when you plant, you know, this is going to be maybe wetter soil, and I don't want to put my high tunnel here. So for example, I had a client, I'm also a real estate agent, and we're buying land, and she found out that her water table is right there. So she said, oh, I'm going to build a house. And I was like, well, if you plant there's wetland all over. So I said, if you put your high tunnel right on wetland, it might be wet the entire season. So you might not get any crops. So like, it's important to know, you know, also how high, where you're putting your high tunnel, like the soil type. Mhm.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I love this question, and just that like knowing who's all on today is exciting.
All right. Maybe we could talk a bit about how does pest control, like insect pests, differ from outside to inside?
Yeah, like I think there's because you're indoors, and also like we have our 40 acres of 12 other farmers sharing the same plot with us. It's just inevitable for this plot for potato beetles, because let's say one farmer is planting one and the other one's leaving it sit fallow for this year. They're constantly making babies. So this year what we've done is we've eliminated potatoes on the field altogether after the last 10 years. So there's certain strategies that you can do on your farm. Like some people have planted marigolds, or they do like a trap crop where you can like excite, and flea beetles is just inevitable. You guys know that right here in the upper Midwest. Like I don't know anyone who has gone away with like not having flea beetles at the beginning of the season. So usually what I do is I just kind of let everyone else get a stab at it, and then I plant it like just a little bit later. So that way you're not losing crops. So you're doing more like trap cropping. The crop rotations that we're doing. So like when you're in the field or even inside the high tunnel here, you want to try to rotate your crops for that diversity. And then to like open up the sides in the winter to like kill off all the bugs is important, because like not, you know, a lot of greenhouses, why they have a lot of pest issues, and they're probably laying eggs there and they don't have a time to like die out in the winter time. So it's important that you're like, you know, sterilizing you're also indoors and outdoors, and the strategies that you can use. The worst case, if we had a result to anything, it has to be organic. And I think Organic is one of the certified organic strategies that we can use, but that's usually like last resort if you can't. Literally, we were picking off potato beetles and like squeezing them in the early stages. If you see aphids and stuff, we're literally wearing gloves and going out there in the field and like killing the eggs before it comes out. So there's many strategies. There's also certain birds that like to eat certain types of insects. So like inviting those healthy birds in, but then of course the birds are also eating seeds. So there's like a give and take with like this whole entire biodiversity. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was the answer to the question, or if anyone have any other questions.
Does anyone have any additional questions about insect pests in high tunnels? Are there any specific disease problems that are different in high tunnels that you wouldn't experience growing outside?
We haven't experienced any. But then we have the 1-800 number to Natalie Hoydal at U of M. So actually I have her email and her text. So they've been kind of like our doctors. If anything like grows and it's looking kind of weird or leggy. This year, I think our compost mix wasn't just mixed very well. So everything was kind of leggy at one point. So when usually it's like a bunch of us, it's not a disease. It's probably just like, we found out it's a potting soil issue. So yeah, like every year it's different. Like, to be honest, like here in Minnesota with like this crazy weather, like 1 minute it's really hot, 1 minute it's really cold. And then all of a sudden the chicks are here earlier and the, mosquitoes are here earlier. Like it's just different breeding periods, and, more rain, the more mosquito gets breeded. So, and certain pests like different conditions, right? So I want to say like that, you need a nice bat habitat, right? So like, I think in Stillwater, we were having issues with like the bat population, and they had sent us out an email on that. So like, that's also, it's just crazy how like, once you become a farmer, like that you stay so intact with the weather and you stay so intact with like the life around you. So it's just good to know like what's going on. Like areas in Bandits Heights and White Bear, they're polluting some of those areas with some chemical spills at the water gremlin there. And there's a huge lawsuit, and some of the swans were dying off. And so I think like, even like here in pests, when you start seeing an increase of some certain pests, and you're just kind of questioning yourself, like, what is here's mom handing me the hat because it's getting hot in water. So, I definitely, just to keep in mind that like you're also breeding that. So like to keep pools of water around your area is probably not a good idea, or like water settling down. You're breeding certain types of insects. But yeah, so we have not yet faced any like bacteria issue or like disease issue yet. But as in regards of pests and like insects, yes, we have, because that's just a regular thing. And it's very seasonal too, right? So they usually are gone. And then if you miss them and you put remay on top, and sometimes you're capturing them on top of the remay if you're doing brassicas, and they're caught in, like the eggs were planted in the last season, you put it over and then all of a sudden you lift it and there's all these little like, so we're constantly trying to like switch up beds so that trick them so that they're in a different area. But
Nice.
Any other questions?
Stephanie, my chat on my other phone went down. So if there's any questions, if you could say them.
Nope.
Okay. Do you want to talk through a bit more of the process from a farmer's perspective of working with FSA and NRCS?
Yeah, I want to say that I had to be very patient, because the first thing was we were looking for land that was certified organic, and I had to become a realtor myself, because no one understands that there's no pre-approval letter for a FSA loan. And then for the NRCS, that was a grant. So there's only so much grant money that they would allot. So like usually if you miss the first round, I recommend you to ask them to keep your application on to the second round, or apply for the second round, because I got it the second round. I want to say 10 years ago we applied, but like again, the Hugo tornado came through and took out our high tunnel then we just didn't apply anymore, because we were like, we didn't know if there was going to be another touchdown. And then we were able to get this one in place. So that would be my recommendation is get to know your NRCS representative. And I'm sure that all the lenders in Rochester and Minnesota knows me by name now, because I call them like every other day to see where my application is or like what I'm missing. For the farm loan that I got for the land, that one takes a little bit more work with like gathering your docs and your proof of income and having those 2 to 4 years of like good Schedule F's paperwork. But in regards to the NRCS, it was a much quicker and easier. I think it's like an application just like states what your current income is and where you are as far as like status. It's very simple. So I would recommend you to do it early on. Like I think right now is like funding season. So like the next round of season would be for next year already. So just get to know your NRCS rep in your region, and usually different counties, like even though we're in Washington County, our county is out in Rochester, and that's about like really far out for us. So I'm trying to get my status redesignated in somewhere closer, but it's a government agency, so they assign it to whichever office. areas that are most fitting to you. So.
Do you have any advice for, there's some NRCS people and different like ag service professionals on, do you have any advice for them in working with Hmong farmers?
I definitely would say that like an interpreter, like even though I spoke perfect English, like I'm just wondering, like for all those who don't speak English, who are farmers, like I want to say, 70% of our farmers at the downtown St. Paul Farmers Market is all Hmong. And I'm sure all of those farmers would love this resource. So if I'm having a difficult time like completing forms and like understanding the process, I'm just wondering, like for them, they probably don't have somebody to help them through the process. So that would be my recommendation, is to have like a resource there when they come in. And I do know that I've heard NRCS, they're more of a conservation program, right? So to explain that, like there's different programs once they get there, so they could apply for, like maybe like fencing if you're doing like animal grazing or anything along those lines on resources that they don't know. So that would be my first recommendation, is that it's such a, like the other day I was looking for MDA grants and loans, and I myself, have a degree and I don't know how to navigate. I speak perfect English. So I just called the number to the lender or the person in charge of those programs to ask them, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Like, which one would you recommend me to? So I think like in cultural wise, it's good to have just a phone number to call. So even for like after this workshop for you interpreters, like I'm just going to say, call our organic specialist line at Moses, call them, Mhonpaj or Rodrigo or Naima, whoever is an organic specialist. And then we will, give you the resource and help you navigate. I think having a navigator is so important after the fact, because they can navigate you to the resource, but like actually applying and going through the process, like there's no technical support. So here at Big River Farms, I know they have like a Katie Kuluvacek, who's a navigator, and she will like a land access navigator that can help you through the process that they get paid a consulting fee to do. So there's resources like that people who don't speak English or speak the language would not know, but they're very good farmers, like they can raise crops and make it survive. And so they have what I call the back in the country education, but just probably not the language. So. Mhm.
Are there any questions from anybody there? Want to take a brief pause and see if there's any questions? All right, I see Stephanie put the phone number in the chat. Yeah, and our specialists, we have specialists that can answer questions about organic farming and certification in English, Hmong, Spanish, Swahili, and Somali. And people that can talk to you about vegetables, fruit, all kinds of livestock, grain, forage crops, marketing, all that kind of stuff.
Can I just highlight one thing, is that a lot of people don't know what certified organic is in our community. They think it's just not using pesticide. But how I like to say it is that our ancestors, all of our ancestors who was here before us, our indigenous ancestors, knew how to farm, and they found a way of farming, and it's not a new thing. So people think like organic farming is like new created green movement. I'm like, no, it actually was how it was. And they figured out an organic way of incorporating soil fertility and all that. And that's how it was always done by our ancestors. And we just are now formalizing it into an education to say, okay, well, here's strategies, and farming is always evolving and learning. So I just want to say that being certified organic there's a logo and a stamp to it, but it's also a lifestyle and a strategy to your incorporating it into your lifestyle and living. So for those Hmong farmers or those non-English speaker farmers who are online with me today, I want to say that because you're not putting chemicals in it doesn't mean it's just necessarily that's the definition. We used to define that it's produce that you don't put chemicals on. That's our direct translation. But how I like to redefine organic is it's a lifestyle change to your way of farming. So your farming strategies, techniques, all into that. And eventually my hope with Chuck is to like create these mini videos on how to farm organically and how, with what crop and what strategies, and eventually to, have examples of that for anyone who wants to learn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you want to talk a bit more about some of the production things? Like May was just pruning the tomatoes. Do you want to talk a bit about
Yeah.
like trellising them and
Trellising.
pruning them and just that side of the management?
Yep.
of
So
them?
when so it's a lot of work, you know, when you think about it. Some people ask me, do I just put in my tomato plants and they'll just grow? Well, they are gonna have their vines, so you have to like vine it up the trellising. So our trellis system is a little bit different. I've seen like people very creative where they have hanging trellises. Ours is, you know, manufactured from my parents' idea. Is basically every time they grow taller, you're basically taking a line, a rope line, and you're trellising it across. And then you want to always be pruning it, because the more you prune it, the more, it's almost like the more you give, the more you know how to give more. So as with any plants, you need to prune it so that way it knows to produce more. But if you don't prune it, then it's not going to grow taller and produce. So, and we want to create a habitat that engages with cross-pollination with bees. So we did have beekeepers out here in the back of our lot that creates that kind of beekeeping, so that way we can come cross-pollinate. I've had people who pot their tomato plants at home and they don't take it outdoors so it doesn't get pollinated. So most people are saying take a toothbrush and like go shake it, so hopefully it'll know to like cross-pollinate. So that's so important for you to create that biodiversity on your farm. Even if you don't have a beekeeper on your farm, like plant marigolds or plant like some kind of flower around so that you can create that lifestyle. And then, yeah, so May was pruning it, she trellised it, and then we're watering it twice a day just to make sure. And we're constantly, because there needs to be a thermostat in here, and May's automatic thermostat, like she lives on the farm, I feel like every day. So she's in here, and if it's a little bit hotter, she's rolling it up. So now that it's the summer, you want to keep it halfway rolled, like how I have it rolled up throughout the entire season. And as you can see, there's a lot of bunnies in the areas over here. So like it's on the sides, there's these laddles that you can like roll up. So you always want to keep it rolled up like this in the summertime now, because your high tunnel will overheat and it will burn all of your plants. You know, we had once where we couldn't run in time to the Good Acre to pull up our high tunnels, and all of our plants started sleeping already. So you want to make sure that you have like chicken wire like this on the bottom, because there are many pests. They talk about many animals and critters. So there's gophers, there's moles. All of the animals will love you, especially deers. If deers get into our high tunnels, they will eat everything. Like we thought they didn't know how to eat onions. Now they know how to eat onions. So like when deers they think my mom brings her compost here. So they think my mom is their mom now. So all the baby deers come visit us every day. Or they even come and sleep by our high tunnels. So they're constantly looking in here because they see green, you know, food. So you want to make sure it's the rabbits don't get in here. The gophers don't get in here. So you can see the side panelings on the bottom, and then you see chicken wire all the way to the top, because once the moles and stuff and gophers get in here, you're kind of game over. And so you have to capture them. So May's the master catcher of like moles and gophers and anything you can think of, like mice. So like in here, there's none of that issue, because we have it all caged and we keep the doors closed, and then the side are up and down. So you will confront everything in farming when it comes to yeah. And then when it gets less than, so like, for example, your tomato plants can't be less than 40 degrees less or hotter than 75. So for those of you who are beginning to do planting your plants, and you're new to this, there's directions that Johnny sees or whoever you get it from that gives you the temperature of where your desired temperature should be. And that's where you want. That's why every time, if you're on my Facebook, you'll see me texting you like, go out and cover your crops, or go into your high tunnels and put Remay on tonight, you know, because in Minnesota, it could be snowing the next day and then like 80 degrees the next day. So like you have to constantly make sure your plants are not heated up or it's not too cold. And it's like a baby, like your plants are like a baby. You constantly babying them until they're like fruiting and they become teenagers. So yeah, I don't know if that was a good example, but
yeah. Yeah. And I built myself a little greenhouse at my old house, and I didn't figure out a good enough way to vent it.
Yep.
And all of the flowers on the tomatoes died.
Right, because it was probably too hot.
Yeah. So if you don't vent it enough and it doesn't stay cool enough, then the flowers will die and you won't get any fruit.
Correct. Yep. That's the one thing is like, it's just, you got to make sure. And so like having a thermostat or buying like a now they're so advanced where they have those Nest thermostats that like let you know when it's hot, or even something that would alert you. So on our phone, that iMonit system, IMMONIT, will alert our phones and say, hey, it's getting, our high tunnels got as hot as 140 degrees. That's like way over the, so when we went in there, we were like, we just left it, I think that morning, it was just for an hour. We had forgotten to roll up the sides. And I looked at my husband, like, did you go open? And he's like, I thought you did. And I said, I thought you did. And so we both ran over there and our plants were just sleeping. So, but they're so resilient. I mean, like they go through frost. Frost came, remember in May, you guys, and there was like that crazy season where like frost came and it got to it, and they all were yellow. And I was sad. I thought, we lost all our tomatoes. And then like next week they're all green. And I was like, okay, so there's hope at the end of the yellow brick road for you in farming. So there's just make sure, and I'm constantly talking to my plants. But yeah, it's up and down, and you'll kind of see if it still has its tip and it's still flowering, you're good to go in some green. But if they're totally yellow and they're to the root, like you're done with the tomatoes. So anything else? I've been talking a lot. I don't know if there's any other questions in regards to planting.
Oh yeah. Do you want to talk a bit more about tips for constructing a high tunnel?
Oh yes. So don't pull your plastic in the winter time because it's cold. So you don't have that elasticity to like make it really tight. Because if we pulled the greenhouse one down when it was in the winter time, because we have to, for greenhouses, they operate in the winter. So it had a hole in it and we had to repair it. So that was the only reason why we did it in winter. But you want to get it right now when it's like hot like this out. You don't want to pull it when it's windy because your plastic will be like whipping everywhere and everyone's trying to catch the plastic. You're trying to pull it over. So that would be my tip, is like, you got to wait for like a warmer days just so you can like stretch it a little bit. So that way it sticks on really nice and you could like, screw everything in. And so, less windy day, we look for the weather to make sure like we're not having straight winds. Like we're in the forest where we have some barriers. So the placement of your high tunnel is very important. So like you want some like tree line. So that way, like, for example, here we have a tree line going this way and a tree line going this way, but this is like open field. So we're still getting some direct, but 40 acres down that way, there is another tree line, but that's really far away from here. But at least we have two almost in the corner of these two wind barriers. So when we place your high tunnels, and then also like, I believe if you want more sunlight in the winter time, I believe it's east to south, east west. Yep. You got to face your ridge line east west. So that way you're getting more direct sunlight to your high tunnels. Mm-hmm. I think that was like one of the major questions that we had.
Yeah, I think so. Any other questions? Oh yeah. Who did you order your high tunnel from and why?
This one that we're in right now, we ordered from FarmTech because I initially didn't know that there was actually different suppliers. We only knew of the FarmTech catalog. And to get this, I started farming when I was 14 and now I'm like really old. So I've been in farming all my life, so I've evolved. But when I went to Moses conference and they sat at one of the booths and I went up to the Zimmerman supplier, and I believe he was the owner. And he told me that he custom and how he made the purlins. To me, it was a lot closer together. So then that way I felt like it was more sturdy. So like, for example, this one, we don't have as many like rails going across and purlins as I would like to. And like, it doesn't have that W truss. So if you look up, it's just like it's rounded, right? So, I mean, this is not ideally in Minnesota. I mean, the one thing we had was like, we had more like snow issue, and then, just the sturdiness of it coming out. And then you can see now over the years, the high tunnel has been kind of like, it's also maybe our fault for like the putting it up, with maybe not enough engineer work, because none of us are engineers, so like we follow directions, but I would recommend you to get a carpenter involved. So make sure that to follow the manual, because if you don't follow it, your high tunnel is going to look lopsided, or, so this has been 15 years. This is still standing. So we've been here for a long time. We were like the original farmers that started at Big River Farms here.
How many times have you had to redo the plastic?
I want to say probably maybe three times. Like they stay pretty sturdy throughout the winter. It's just usually if we have really bad winters and like with a lot of ice and with a lot of heaviness that would droop down, that's usually when we have to get rid of the plastic. And then like I would recommend like every 5 years to like just get a new one anyways, you know. Like 3 to 5 years is my time, but some could go longer. I've seen people like try to stretch it to 7 or 10 years, but like the life, just the normal wear and tear and weather and like hail, right, on your, you know, making it vulnerable to like maybe creating holes in your plastic. So yeah, you don't need double layer like the greenhouses. Greenhouses are double layer, then you could put like a fan to blow the two so they don't stick and you need more of that heating. But in here, you're fine with like a single layer. But yeah, so I think, yeah, what was your other question? Did I answer all your questions? Why we selected Zimmerman. Yeah, and then Zimmerman also, they were custom. So let's say if you want them longer or you want them shorter, if you have a certain area that you want to custom it to, they'll do it. And then how the truss, like I said earlier, like how the truss comes together and how many purlins you want per distance of each section, they will also custom that. So I love the fact that, but their standard is basically built for the upper Midwest. So like they kind of had success. We've called other people, like A Good Acre is a wholesaler here and you know, nonprofit that runs a farm, and Dave Vaneka, who works there, was the one who referred me to them and said, hey, we've got really good success with this. So I have not shopped around with other vendors. I'm sure that other people have been able to like supply through someone else, but we chose Zimmerman just because we've had like big success. And then knowing that we're in Minnesota, there's every kind of weather you can think of. So I wanted them one that could withstand like Minnesota.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, let me shift a little bit.
Yep. Make it back up.
Yeah, one thing it makes me think of when the Superdome collapsed.
Oh yeah.
As a
Like as our thing is like swooping down.
yeah. Yeah. So what about, so I'm going to point out over here, there's a couple different like holes and stuff. Do you go and patch those?
So there's a special kind of tape and like also like material that you can patch those up. So it's just a small hole that you could patch up and you can do it. So yeah, as you can see, you just basically, it's like clear tape almost, and you just patch it up. There's different types of, you can get them at like Farm Tech, and plastic is very cheap. So I would just say like this one, after this year, we probably just like order a new one. So like it's time for a new one. So we would just order one and then just throw it over. And I would say it's less you don't need to get insurance. Some people ask like, should I get insurance for my plastic? I'm like, you know, the years that you get from it and like the process, no one insures high tunnels plastic.
Yeah.
Because I think FSA had us to try to get insurance on the high tunnels, and we just did the math, and it cost more to buy the insurance than to actually just replace the plastic. So
yeah. So for irrigation in here,
it's drip irrigation. So as you can see here, or actually the other one is drip. I don't think they full drip yet. They irrigate because we have these water hoses. So main them with just water because it's enough of a distance to do. But in our other high tunnels, we did drip irrigation. So under the plastic, you pull drip irrigation, and then you can just turn it on, and it'll just like while you're working or doing something else, you could be like weeding in the field and still have the drip irrigation going. But this one, I think it's like May's baby, where she actually takes the hose and she likes to go down. It's just each of us, to be honest, each family member, we each have our own style of farming. So some likes to water the hose, and then others like to irrigate for simplicity. So yeah, so for irrigation on the other one, we drip irrigate it. But because the one at Good Acre has a lot more rock and very sandy, that you almost have to drench the entire plant. So like you have to know your soil to be like, because if you drip, it's going to take you the entire day, and we can't stand there and wait the entire day because that's a remote site. So for like common sense, it just makes sense for us to like, you know, water and like full blast, you know, not blast, but like with a lot of water and drenching each of the holes for the plants rather than letting it irrigate and, you know, coming home and going back to shut it off.
Yeah. Any questions from the participants? Feel free to chime in at any time. Let's see. So if you aren't able to get an NRCS fund or an NRCS grant to help you pay for it, like how much would it cost to do a similar greenhouse to
like
this?
So this one, I want to say like just all the parts and stuff, because it was a big one. I think it was less expensive back in the days, like 15 years ago. Now it's about like, I want to say anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000. And that doesn't include the sidewalls. So like we had to build, this is my dad's makeshift of the sidewalls. So like everybody has different carpentry style. And of course, this is before I married my husband.
Yeah, we can
Put this together. So
look at the side,
yeah, so like basically there's like a door here, right? And then he basically ran some wood across this way, and then he like brought him down like that, so it kind of made like a square route to that way. So it's kind of like whatever wood we had in stock was when we put the sidewall together, and it's held up pretty like well. You have your door here, and then you want to make sure your door is like closes, because if it swings open, that's why it's a little bit tilted, and because of the wind that took it away. But the tilt actually helps keep the door shut, because deers can actually just jump in. So we close the door this way, so that way it's not swinging out that way, like it's swinging out that way versus like being able to like open out from the outside in. So the positioning of the doors, you can have doors at both ends, but we only put one door at this end. So most people, like this should be enough air in and out, and also all along the sidewall should be enough air for your high tunnels. So yeah, so like so the extra cost would be like maybe your wood for the sidewall, and then the plastic coming on the ends. Those would be the only additional costs, and then also your drip irrigation. So I think total package you're looking from anywhere from 7 to like 12,000, depending upon if you want one this big. But if you don't want one this big, right? And you're like, if someone I think said they were only doing like a in their backyard, or I'm not sure if they're in the city or if they're in the rural area. But if you're in the city, then you can only have like a, 12 by 30 or 12 by 20. Then you're not really needing all this. So like it'll cost you less. So I've seen high tunnels as low as like $5,000 or $4,000 for like very short high tunnels and long, So this is because we have a bigger operation. We feed about, I want to say 3 CSAs. So we feed the Good Acre CSA, Big River Farms, and our own. And that's a total of about 700 member CSA. So like our entire like 6 acres that we're operating off feeds that many people. Plus we donate about 50,000 pounds of food every year to food shelves. So just to give you the complexity of our farm operation, along with, and the high tunnel itself, I think is our most highest production and highest yield. So like all the other crops in the field, it's kind of like a hit or miss. If hail gets to it, it's over, or if like one of the areas get flooded, like you're not having the crop. But here there's more of like a guaranteed return, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. So do you have any idea, like even if you have to buy it yourself or finance it through a different kind of lending, like how long would it take to get a return on your investment, basically?
I would say that year, if you get everything in ground.
Yeah.
Yep. I would say like we recovered, I want to say within the first year. I want to say it takes us 2 years, because if it's 10,000, and it depends on what your markets are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like if you've got, like you have enough production. So let's say we generated, if 180 pints a week, and that's at $6 a pint, I mean, do the math, right? If we were to sell everything, because we donate, like, I want to say 30% of our produce from this high tunnel to like the food shelves in the Twin Cities. But if you were to sell all of it, you probably have a very high return of investment. So I want to say within the first or second year, you should be able to get all of your return on investment. And then basically the years after that, once it's erected, you should be good to go. Everything else would be profit from then on, other than leasing the land. I don't know if like the land that you're on would be the additional lease, but we're leasing from Big River Farms. So that would be, this high tunnel is leased, the land is leased from them. So.
Okay. Any other questions from the chat? Hannah said, I'd agree with that price range. Some manufacturers have basic, standard, and premium kit options available. Most do not include the lumber.
Correct.
Yeah.
because they don't have like lumber is, you can get it from Menards. And of course, lumber prices have gone up. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's crazy. So I can't quote you now what we bought lumber back last year, even, you know, so.
Oh yeah, one thing I'm noticing here, that you
Pea shoots?
can't see at home. Yeah, there are
Pea shoots.
pea shoots growing in the same holes. I'm gonna try to
Yep,
loosen
so
this up a
that's
little
one
bit.
of our cover crop that we have in here. So you can see the pea shoots are non-voluntary coming up, and you could even see it over there. So one of the cover crops we used last year was peas and clover. So you'll see that throughout. And then once the season's ready to start, what I do is I just basically, if you can see it down here, you just basically come out and we till it over. And so we use a handheld rototiller to do, a lot of people call it like low tillage. So we don't bring in the tractors in here, whatever. It's usually just a smaller handheld rototiller, and we're just working with a line. Then we're keeping every other row kind of like, you know, with low tillage, or with a plastic mulch on it. So I know we tried to do hay once, but we figured that hay also has bacteria in it. So one year we tried it on one of our just outdoors, and for some reason the hay that we got had some bacteria and it got onto the tomato plants. So that's the only reason why we went plastic mulch. But once we have more farm hands here, I think the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna try a fabric. So that way we can use it every year. We're gonna burn holes into the fabric and use that every year, because we know that that's the distance for the plants. So one of the ideas, once we have so many ideas, but we only have so many farm hands to make our ideas come to fruition. And then last minute comes and you're stuck with the plastic again. But next year we want to transfer into all fabric.
Yeah, with the peas, are you gonna harvest the?
You can eat them. Yeah, you can eat them. So like I eat, I don't know, in most community we eat pea tip shoots.
Mhm.
So we just harvest them and then eat them.
Okay.
But if you till it back into the soil, then it gives the nutrition back. So that's really for the ground.
Okay.
But you can harvest it before you till it over. So we eat pea shoots. So we don't let it sprout very tall.
Mhm.
These ones are voluntary. So like, yeah, that's how we get nutrition back into the ground. Pea shoots, clover.
Okay. Any other questions? We have about 12 minutes left on our allotted time. Oh, another question. How soon can you start seedlings in a high tunnel? So if it wasn't heated, I guess.
May 4th.
May
This
4th.
year.
Okay.
I remember it was May 4th this year. So you want to look at like your last frost state from last year to this year when to seed. But because frost is crazy this year, I kind of lied to everyone until May 4th. And then of course it frosted like the week after.
Yeah.
And so I became the liar. But you know, Minnesota this year was just kind of crazy, or it seems like every year now is the tradition. So everyone always says plant your stuff outside Memorial Day weekend, right? And then the beginning. So yeah, so May 4th, we were able to get in our tomatoes and our potatoes. Yeah, and our Swiss chards. So
Yeah, but then if you have, I know some people use like propane heaters in
yeah, to
high
like heat, yep,
tunnels.
mhm.
So if you had that, when could you start seedlings?
I mean, you could start as early as seedlings, or are talking about in-ground planting?
First seedlings, and then we can talk about in-ground.
Okay, so
planting.
seedlings, you can go. I mean, my mom is out here in February, March with us in our seedlings already for all varieties. So we have over 70 varieties of produce. So we do anything from like your peppers to your bok choys to everything that you can think of vegetable wise, squashes, your cucurbites, your alliums, like all of those. Alliums are like, of course, everyone's least favorite because you plant them in little, you know, cells and 120 cells, and you've got about 500 flats or
Yeah,
300.
very time consuming.
Yeah, very
to
time
plant.
consuming. Yeah. So I would say, so we started as early as March because our propane is out here. So we're constantly keeping it heated, and then we go through the German chamber, and then we're letting it kind of advance, so it just depends on your days to seed, and how much buying time you want into the ground. So like, and you don't want it to overgrow in your cells. So yeah, so like the seedlings, you could start as early as that if you have a greenhouse with a furnace and a high tunnel. And you have to make sure you have enough air, like you said, right? Like you have to get your thermostat hooked up to your fan so it knows how to switch on and off when it's too hot or too cold, because you don't want your plants dying, and you need the humidity control inside your greenhouses. Now for the high tunnels, you're also now controlling temperature, but you're only controlling it through the sidewalls now. And you don't have a heat or you don't have a fan in here. So, but if you want to start a seedling in here operation, like our other high tunnel down there, where you convert a high tunnel into greenhouse, you can. It just costs more money with a little bit of more propane because you have higher ceilings, right? So the reason why you go out and greenhouses are shorter and they're like maybe just only 8 feet or 9 feet tall, that's because, or 10 feet tall, that's because they want less money for heating the seedlings. So, but if you can convert one of these high tunnels into a greenhouse, like our other one, because we've got about 12 farmers here, so we need all the space, and that extra propane doesn't cost a lot. But if you're just starting out, then I would recommend you to, keep a ventilator, and you need a fan attached to this high tunnel. So basically a high tunnel is a greenhouse without a furnace and a fan. That's the definition. And then we're really tall roof line.
All right. Any other questions from the chat? All right, do you have anything else you'd want to say to conclude?
I just encourage you guys to do it. If you want to do it. I think we waited like 10 years before we got one, and we're like, why didn't we think? So every year we would plant outside, get blight, and then all our tomatoes, we would trellis it in the field. And then we finally figured out, we're like, why didn't we think of this sooner? And the investment is so worth it, even if, we, the other two high tunnels, we didn't get SARE for, and this one, but it's so worth it. Like you're so happy because as farmers, we work so hard, and sometimes like you just need some guarantees, that at least if everything else fails outside, that you've got something indoors. I know it sounds kind of sad sometimes, but it's, I would recommend you to get one. You're going to love it. And to be honest, like if we just had some hanging planters, I mean, we have so many ideas. Like I want to put strawberries, and Karen asked, like, what are your new varieties? I'm like, well, I want to do strawberries. I want to do lettuce inside. Like I want to go all to indoors and then just basically work with this environment. It's less labor intensive because you're working in like small batches and you're turning it around, you're more efficient, and you're learning more strategies. I'm going to take the Master Gardener program. I think this year was John Paul. And so he also has strategies on like efficient growing. So I want to encourage people that like, there's so much resources on efficiency. So like reach out to us and especially Moses. I mean, like they have all the experts here for you guys that like, just it's a phone call away. And if you don't know anything after this, the only thing you remembered me saying at the end of the presentation is call our 1-800 number for Moses, and we'll definitely reach out to you, and like excited to have you guys invite me today. So thank you.
Oh, one other thing. Do you have any tips for Hmong farmers who are pursuing or interested in pursuing organic certification?
Yeah, so we have, I know Moses, of course, have resources, right? So that's more of like, you can come to incubator farms that are teaching people how to be organic farmers. Is Bigger Farms here. And I think land stewardship has more of like just learning how to become a farmer, but not organic. So we are the only, I believe, certified organic incubator farm, right, Chuck, in here in Minnesota?
Maybe in Minnesota, but in Wisconsin, there is the Farley Center is an incubator farm somewhere near Madison. And then there's the Fondy Farms near Milwaukee that I'm not sure if they're certified organic or not, but they're another incubator farm.
Yeah. So what an incubator farm is, for those who don't know, is it's basically because your farm is so new and you don't know how to learn the strategies. Throughout the winter, they have like about sessions, and I used to teach them about like how to grow, what to put into your soil, like strategies. A lot of the Hmong farmers I find coming into organic farming is because a lot of their parents have passed away and they've been raised in Laos and came here to America and developed cancer. So they're finding out that a lot of the pesticide that they use to like kill our weeds in Roundup. And a lot of our Hmong farmers were never told. When we go to Home Depot, nobody tells us that this is what you're supposed to do. Like they don't tell you organic strategy, they just hand you a chemical. So it's not the fault that we didn't know, it's because we were never given the resources, right? So I think there's a wrong to be corrected, that resources within our retail stores need to be giving out some of these information. And like, you know, some of the main suppliers here, like BFG or Johnson supplier, I would recommend you, like, a program like this is good, because then you're there. My mom, May Lee, is a farm manager here, where she's hand-holding you through like how to seed source organically, and to know that the seeds has not been hybrid or genetically modified. And so, yeah, if you guys want to learn more, feel free to reach out to us. If you want to be an incubator farm, other than that, Moses has like awesome resources, just like from anything from what fertility to, I don't know, water irrigation. I feel like all the technical questions you guys have resources to. So is that correct? And
Yeah.
it's translated in Hmong too, right? So
Yeah, there's a few documents in Hmong and in Spanish as well. And maybe Stephanie, if you want to put links to the chat to our documents that have been translated.
Yep, I can do that. Sorry.
and just to
Excellent.
Yeah, just to kind of give you guys a background of what inspired us to be farmers or organic farmers is because my grandma had passed away with cancer, and I went back to college, and then I thought I was disengaging in farming all my life. I was like, I'm going to be working at air-conditioned place and never go to farming. And I'm back in it, and found out that it was actually because they lived in North Carolina and they were exposed to a lot of that pesticide, and a lot of the farmers nearby. And then also she had accumulated, you know, tumors throughout. And so I did extensive research, and I was like, oh, so it's actually our environment that's fostering those things that you don't even know that you're exposed to, or like houses that you live in with high radon. One of the houses she came in was very high in radon. That's like radioactive gas within your house. And so if you don't speak English, you wouldn't know how to like test your house or test your soils or like know what you're being exposed to. So I just recommend that like people stay informed. Even in our neighborhoods now in like Oakdale, where 3M has now infiltrated some of the wells out to West Lakeland, where I'm selling property, and they're now seeing traces of the chemicals in ground. So it's kind of dangerous to not know of what's in your community. And once you become more educated and you learn, then you kind of take a step back. And I think this is a way of correcting the carbon imprint on us. And it's just a very small thing that every farmer do. But I feel like as we train more farmers here, our goal is to eventually get you really good and to go buy your own farm and to start your own operation. But we just never left the bigger farms. We've been here for 15 years. So now we're like graduating, but we're still attached to them. So we're still here, but we're like the baby on the umbilical cord that never left. But yeah, but thank you. I just hope that you guys get inspired, and that, you know, you guys share your success story with me too. I'm, you know, one of Moses Organic Specialist. So feel free to send me an email or just say, hey, you know, I went and bought my first high tunnel, and maybe I'll start like a Facebook, you know, feel free to like friend me on Mhonpaj Garden. And I like to post what's happening on our farm and like questions that you may have, or pests. Like I get any questions on there that could be about farming, from like, what is this, to like diseases and stuff. And even though if I don't know, I know somebody who I can send you to. So thank you very much, you guys, for having me today.
Yeah, thank you so much to John and Heather for sharing in the beginning. And thank you so much for sharing, Mhonpaj. That was really, really great. And we're both sweating quite a bit standing here in the high tunnel. But yeah, the recordings will be available in English, Spanish, and Hmong. So keep an eye out for that. Mhonpaj will share the Hmong one on her Facebook, and to Hmong Radio and different resources like that. But yeah, keep in touch and reach out with any questions you might have through the organic answer line. So thank you very much. I think Stephanie has some